Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 10th edition of Nepal Literature Festival. This year, we are marking a decade of celebrating the power of words. For those of you who've been with us, thank you for being with us. None of this would have been possible without you. And for those of you who are new, we are very, very excited to have you. Nepal Literature Festival is one of the biggest literary events held in Nepal. And each year, we bring together writers, authors, thinkers, and intellectuals from different sectors to talk about the issues relevant to our times. We started small in Lalitpur in 2011, where all we had for a backdrop was a concrete building. But since 2016, we've had this stunning Annapurna range behind us, making us possibly one of the most gorgeous literature festivals in the world. This year, we are here with more than 150 speakers, both national and international, who will be conversing in over 50 sessions spread throughout the next 4 days. This year is special, of course, because this marks our 10th year. But it is also special because we are able to gather together in person after almost 2 years of uncertainty and fear. Amidst those months of social and economic crisis, one thing that became clear to us more than ever is the importance of art and artists. Had there not been books, films, music, and other creative mediums, it would have been almost impossible for us to save our sanity. I hope during that time of our confinement, we all understood how potent imagination and creativity can be. As we are starting one of the most anticipated events of the year, I hope the next 4 days will be full of exploration, both of ourselves as well as the world around us. Before starting our sessions, I'd like to give a big shout out to all of our sponsors, without whom this would not have been possible. We have our sessions in 2 venues. The one where we are right now is Bhupi Kaksha, and the one over there is Almeida Kaksha. We will be having back-to-back sessions in both the venues simultaneously. The timing and other information are in the schedule sheet that you can pick up around the venue. We're also live streaming our sessions in different platforms, so do follow us on our social media to keep up with the updates. And I'd also like to request nobody to go live on their personal social media. Now, on to the first session of the day. For the first time in the festival's history, we have a Booker Prize winning author, Shehan Karunatilaka, who won this year's Booker for his book, The 7 Moons of Maali, Almeida. His first book was called Chinaman, but it wasn't about a Chinese man. In fact, it was about cricket, one of the most enduring obsessions of South Asia. That book, too, was critically acclaimed, winning 2012 Commonwealth Book Prize, but it was really his second book that introduced him to the world. The 7 Moons of Maali, Almeida brought the Booker back to South Asia after 14 years. I'm sure that Shehan has a packed calendar, and literature festivals from all around the world have asked him to attend. So thank you, Shehan, for gracing our little festival with your presence. I'd now like to welcome him on stage to talk about his own writing journey, how he started out writing in Sri Lanka, how he decided to become a storyteller, what kept him going, and how he ended up winning the Booker. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Shehan Karunatilaka with a big round of applause.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Writers, readers, friends, and those who are all of the above. It's a joy and an honor to be in Pokhara and to be part of the Nepal Lit Fest. It's been 2 months since the Booker win, and I refer to it as the Booker win, not 2 months since I won the Booker, because that implies that I'm like Lionel Messi, that I defeated Percival Everett in the semi-final, and I had a penalty shootout with Claire Keegan and lifted the cup. Of course, I did nothing of the sort. The only ordinary or extraordinary thing I did was I wrote a book, and so did all the other 12 long-listed writers and all the writers who weren't long-listed for prizes. And Since the win, I've been asked. The strange thing is, everyone wants to talk to me and wants to hear me speak, and which is very strange for a writer because I spend most of my days talking to no one, not even my wife and my kids who are here. I sit in a room talking to myself. And I've been asked a lot of strange questions. What did it feel like to hug the Queen? Does growing a beard help you become a better writer? Many questions. But the main question is, what does this mean? What does this Booker win mean to you, to Sri Lanka, and so on? And the thing is, I guess the one thing it doesn't mean is that I wrote the best book of last year, or this year. It means that I wrote a book and I won this lottery and I'm here now. Because it was the same book, The 7 Moons of Maali, Almeida. It was the same book 6 months ago, which wasn't getting reviewed. No one was interested in writing about it. And my agent, who also used to never call me, never return my emails, now he calls me twice a day. Called me this morning to find out if I had breakfast and so on. And he said, look, you're writing about Sri Lanka. It's a tiny country which no one's heard about. You're writing about a war that no one remembers. So, you're lucky to be published. So, accept that. And, with agents like these, who needs critics? But, he was right. And I guess the difference is there are many types of writers, and there are many ways of classifying writers. But if you classify writers by success, maybe 1%, if I'm being kind, 5% get to win prizes and be bestsellers. And I'm talking about the Stephen Kings, the J.K. Rowlings, the Neil Gaimans, the Margaret Atwoods. 5%, if we're being generous. And then the next tier would be, again, let's be generous, 20% who are perhaps not household names, but are working writers who can make a living from writing fiction, maybe build a house, maybe educate their kids, and most of us would be happy to do that. But the rest of us are in the 75%. We have things called day jobs. Some of us work in universities, some of us work as journalists. In my case, I work as an advertising copywriter. And we do our day jobs, we pay our bills, and then somehow we carve a couple of hours in the day to write our little stories. And the question is, why do we do it? What motivates us to write stories about South Asia, sitting in Colombo, Kurunegala, Kathmandu, Pokhara, wherever you are, writing these stories that your agent says, well, the world isn't really asking for them, no one's really interested in them. Why are we doing it? And I remember with my first book, with Chinaman, The Legend of Pradeep Mathew, which is going to be published in China now, and it's not going to be called Chinaman for obvious reasons. Same with America. America also, they don't like this title because it's a racial. So one thing that America and China agree on is that this book needs a new title. But I remember when I stumbled on the idea that what if the greatest cricketer of all time, the greatest genius to play cricket, played for Sri Lanka in 1985, and therefore nobody noticed him apart from one drunken journalist. And I thought, okay, this is an interesting story, someone should write it. And for months, perhaps even years, I sat around thinking, okay, someone should write this. I'd love to read this book. And then after a while, you realize no one is writing books about left-arm leg spinners who played for Sri Lanka in the 80s. And I thought, well, perhaps maybe I'll have a crack at doing it. For no other reason than I would like to see this book out there. And so that's what you do. You find these stories. And one thing we're blessed with in the subcontinent, in South Asia, is we're surrounded by conflicts and contradictions and absurdities and stories that no one else is telling. And you feel that, why don't I have a crack? Because no one's going to tell this story, and that's the only way it can live. So that's the first motivation. But the second motivation also has to do with quality. So when I was growing up, thinking of being a writer in the 80s and 90s in Sri Lanka, there wasn't a Sri Lankan section in the bookshop. There are a few Sri Lankan books. And the books about Sri Lanka were mainly written by expats, foreigners, people who'd lived here, or Sri Lankan writers who no longer lived in Sri Lanka. And these were published by Penguin, HarperCollins, and were at the front of the bookshop. The books by Sri Lankan writers were usually self-published, probably not edited. Some of them were not very good, and they were in a corner of that bookshop. And I remember thinking, why why can't we have a book written by a Sri Lankan that can sit up there next to Stephen King and Margaret Atwood on that shelf? And of course, that has to do with craft and quality and so on. And the fact is, you find this story that no one else can tell, and then you try and write a draft, and then you pick up the draft and ask yourself, is this any good? And sadly, most times the answer is no, it's got potential, but you need to keep working harder at it. And you take that and you keep doing it. And for me, I didn't expect to be published outside of Colombo. I thought maybe it might come out in India. I certainly didn't expect it to come out in the UK, either book. And therefore, you wonder, why are you doing this thing? What's the point of it? But for me, my own motivation was, I thought, okay, if you can write a book that a stranger. So for Chinaman, the motivation was, if you knew nothing about cricket, you knew nothing about Sri Lanka, had no inkling or interest in Sri Lankan cricket or what it's about, that you could still read it, pick up the book and have an experience. And it's the same with the 7 Moons of Maali Almeida. Did the world need a ghost story about a gay war photographer who's dead from 1989? Probably not, but it's a story that I thought should be told, and I would like to see out there. And so in the end, that's why we write. We find a story that no one else can tell, and we know that only we can tell it the way we want to. And you try and provide an experience. And so what does the Booker Prize mean? It does mean that I'm going to be at LitFest speaking for the next 12 months, probably not writing that very much. It also means that suddenly this little book that was written in my office room in Colombo 7 years ago, over the last 7 years, is going to find a wider audience and going to be read. But one thing it doesn't mean is my 3rd novel, my 4th novel aren't going to write themselves. I'm going to have to find the time when the phone stops ringing, or perhaps disconnect the phone, turn off the internet, which I highly recommend to all writers, and go to a place where it's just you and this unwritten story, and the story is floating around you. And that's really the motivation to do it. And what keeps me going really is this canvas that we have. We live in South Asia, in these beautiful countries, surrounded by natural beauty, but also surrounded by ugliness, by conflicts, contradictions, absurdities. And if you look at Sri Lanka in the last month, we've had a horrific murder case, which could easily be the start of a Netflix series, which everyone's talking about. Our last 12 months, we've had an economic crisis. We've had the whole country on the streets protesting. We stormed the president's palace and were swimming in his pool. I'm sure you saw the pictures, watching the cricket on his TV, on his couch, and we had all of that. And then we had the grim reality of petrol queues and shortages and turmoil. And as a writer, as a citizen, you're hoping, when is this going to stop? But as a writer, you're thinking, wow, there's so many stories here, and someone should write it. And so I think we are blessed to have this canvas. And the fact is, unlike filmmaking, music, any of the creative crafts that require technology and collaborators, writing, you're almost literally on the same page as someone in Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard or Paris, or it's just you and a bunch of books and a blank piece of paper and a pen that works, hopefully. And so my hope for you all here, the writers, the readers, is that at the Nepal Literature Festival, you encounter some fabulous writers who you'd never heard of before, that you manage to pick up a magical book that you may not have picked up before, and that you engage with passionate readers, of which I know there are plenty among us. And my real hope for the festival, for the next few days, is that it inspires you to find a story that only you can write, and it inspires you to attempt to write it the best way that you can. Thank you very much. Have a great festival.